The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet leaves and the faint tang of the river. In the small riverside town of Willow Creek, Saturdays were always crowded near the water, especially near the old iron railing that overlooked the river's bend. Children ran in scattered clusters, their laughter ringing off the cobblestones. Street vendors sold hot cocoa and roasted chestnuts, the steam curling into the cool afternoon sky. The sun, dipping low, made the water sparkle like scattered diamonds, masking its deadly undertow. Among the crowd, 9-year-old Lily darted between her friends, her bright pink jacket glowing against the muted browns and golds of fallen leaves. She spotted a particularly shiny leaf spinning lazily on the water, and in a moment of pure curiosity, she leaned over the railing to get a closer look. The crowd behind her was distracted by the music from the small festival stage, where a local band strummed acoustic guitars. Parents chatted over the hum of human voices, hands full of warm drinks and snacks. For a heartbeat, Lily felt like she was the only person in the world, her small hands gripping the cold iron bars, eyes wide as the leaf danced just beyond her reach. Then it happened. A rusted bolt, corroded and forgotten beneath layers of flacking paint, gave way with a sharp snap. The railing wobbled violently. Lily screamed, a sound so sudden and piercing that it cut through the laughter and music, and the world tilted beneath her. One moment she was leaning forward, curious and unafraid. The next she was tumbling, arms flailing, into the fast-moving, dark water below. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Parents screamed. Phones whipped out, flashes capturing the chaos. Time slowed, each second stretching into eternity. The river was wider than it seemed, its current swift and merciless. Lily hit the water with a splash that sent icy waves up her chest and into her lungs. She surfaced once, coughing and gasping, her pink jacket now heavy with water, dragging her downward like an anchor. Nearby, people scrambled to the edge of the bank. Some tried to climb down, their sneakers slipping on wet mud and stones. A teenage boy grabbed a long branch and leaned as far as he could, but the current carried Lily just out of reach. Mothers pulled their children back, terrified, shouting instructions that collided with each other in a cacophony of fear. Someone called 911, their voice trembling as they described the scene. Amid the panic, one man stood still, gripping a leash tightly in his hand. He was elderly, with a weathered face lined from years of river fishing and autumn spent walking this very path. His dog, a black Labrador with graying fur around the muzzle, had been calm, sniffing at the ground and greeting passers-by. But now the dog's ears perked sharply. Its body stiffened. Eyes locked on the river, the Labrador's muscles tensed, as if sensing the imminent danger that the humans around it hadn't fully grasped yet. The man's hands shook. "Rex, stay," he barked, his voice cracking. But Rex, hearing the rip of water, smelling the panic, feeling something instinctively urgent, did not listen. The leash slipped through the old man's fingers before he could react, snapping taut for a heartbeat before going slack. The crowd froze, watching as the dog ran to the riverbank and, without hesitation, leaped into the icy current. A collective scream burst from the onlookers. "Stop him!" someone shouted. "He'll drown!" Mothers covered their mouths, shaking their heads, while fathers reached forward as if they could pull both dog and girl out with their arms alone. But Rex was already fighting the water, paddling furiously toward Lily. The current slapped him sideways, spinning him in circles. For a moment, both Lily and the dog disappeared beneath the churning surface. And then silence. No one knew who saw what first, the flash of black fur, the tiny pink jacket bouncing on the waves, or the absolute terror mirrored in the eyes of the elderly man at the edge of the river. People clutched each other, some crying outright, others frozen in disbelief. Somewhere, a phone still recorded the scene, its camera capturing the horror in real time. It was a moment that would be replayed in every mind along the riverbank for the rest of their lives. The sound of the rushing water, the shouting, the flapping of leaves in the wind, it all blended into a chaotic symphony of fear. Lily was just a child, fragile and innocent. Rex was just a dog, aging and untested in anything beyond leisurely walks. And yet, instinct and courage had intertwined in a way no one could have anticipated. The river didn't care about the stakes, the panic, or the prayers. It only surged forward, relentless. And somewhere in its dark, swirling depths, two lives were locked in a fight for survival. The crowd could only watch, hearts hammering, as the Labrador's head bobbed above the surface, swimming toward a pink sleeve that disappeared just out of reach again. For that split second, it felt as though the river itself was holding its breath, waiting to see who or what would win. And just as hope began to waver, something happened that no one on the riverbank expected. Lily's small, waterlogged body bobbed violently in the river, caught in a current that seemed determined to claim her. Her pink jacket, once bright and cheerful, was now a sodden, dragging weight. Each frantic kick she tried to make felt futile against the relentless pull of the water. The roar of the river filled her ears, and even the distant shouts of the crowd sounded muted and far away, like they belonged to another world. She gasped, spluttering, swallowing water that burned her throat, her limbs trembling from cold and fear. Panic clawed at her chest, mixing with an instinctive fight for survival. Above the riverbank was a chaotic scene. Parents screamed for someone to do something, their faces white with terror. Children clutched each other, their small hands trembling. A man slipped on the mud as he tried to inch closer, catching himself on a branch and nearly falling into the very water he wanted to save her from. Phones filmed everything, the red wreck lights glowing ominously, capturing Lily's struggle as if it were a horror movie in real life. Among them, the elderly man, James, stood frozen for a moment, gripping the leash that was no longer in his hands. His eyes followed the ripples of the water, and then they widened as he saw Rex, his old black Labrador, fighting his way toward Lily. James knew the river, had walked its banks countless times, and felt the cold fear that came with its treacherous currents. Yet he also knew something else. Rex had instincts that no human could match, instincts honed not through training but through pure, unexplainable devotion. Rex paddled furiously, the water slapping against his broad shoulders. His black coat was slick, heavy with the river's pull, and yet his eyes remained locked on Lily. The crowd screamed again, many waving their arms frantically. "He's going to get swept under," someone shouted, voice breaking. Others tried to throw ropes, sticks, anything to reach her, but the distance and the river's strength made it almost impossible. The muddy water carried Lily away from them, and with every second, she sank a little deeper into fear. Lily's hands scraped the surface of the water desperately, searching for anything solid. Her jacket weighed her down, water filling its pockets, dragging her toward the jagged rocks lining the riverbed. She kicked once, twice, but the current seemed to mock her efforts, spinning her sideways and carrying her farther from the bank. Her small lungs burned. Panic made her movements jerky, almost reckless. She was terrified, but even in that terror, a spark of hope flickered as she saw Rex's dark shape cutting through the water toward her. Time stretched. Every heartbeat was deafening, echoing in the minds of those watching. The sound of rushing water drowned out rational thought. Mothers sobbed openly, some pressing their children against their chests. Fathers shouted at nothing in particular, some crouching to brace themselves against the slippery ground, praying, pleading, cursing the river's strength. No one dared to move closer than a few feet. The mud made footing impossible, the bank too steep, and the current too strong. Rex reached Lily and snapped his head to her side, letting out a sharp bark that was swallowed immediately by the roar of the river. He paddled with all his might, nudging her gently with his nose and using his body as a shield against the current. Lily's fingers scrabbled at him, clutching at fur that was now the only lifeline between her and the icy, dark water below. She tried to speak, tried to scream, but the river stole her words, leaving only raw terror and instinctive trust. The crowd's shouts became incoherent, a mixture of awe, fear, and desperation. Someone finally managed to throw a rope, but it landed yards away, tangled in branches. Another person grabbed a long branch and extended it toward them, but the gap was too wide. People began looking at each other helplessly, realizing the reality. They were just witnesses, nothing more. James, still at the riverbank, shouted commands at Rex in a voice trembling from adrenaline and fear. "Angle to the left. Don't fight the current." His words were precise, coming from years of walking these paths, reading the river, and knowing just how strong it could be. Somehow, Rex understood, adjusting his paddling to let the current do part of the work, guiding Lily toward a safer bend downstream. The dog's muscles burned, eyes straining, jaw clamped gently on Lily's jacket, his entire being focused on one purpose: survival. For Lily, time was collapsing. Every wave that knocked her under threatened to overwhelm her. Her hands went numb from the cold, her hair plastered to her face. She could barely lift her head, but she could see Rex, that dark shape moving steadily through the water, somehow calm amidst chaos. Her terror mixed with awe. How could a dog be so determined? How could anything in this cold, violent river fight harder than she could, even as her lungs screamed for air? The current spun them sideways, dragging them toward jagged rocks beneath the surface. A sudden wave threw Lily against one, knocking the wind out of her and sending her under for a terrifying second. The crowd gasped collectively, some crying out loud, some silent with frozen dread. James's hands shook as he reached toward the water, fingers trembling, heart racing. He couldn't touch her. All he could do was trust Rex, whose instincts now carried the weight of a child's life. Then came a moment of horrifying clarity. The river's bend was approaching and the rocks grew sharper, the current stronger. Lily's strength was waning, her kicks less effective. She had swallowed water. Her arms trembled with exhaustion. For a heartbeat, it seemed inevitable that the river would claim her. And yet beside her, Rex paddled, jaws still gripping, muscles straining to pull her to safety. The crowd watched, collectively holding its breath, as dog and girl disappeared momentarily beneath the dark, swirling water. A scream rose in the air, not just from the crowd, but from every instinct in every person present, as though the river itself had become a living predator. And then Rex's head surfaced again, pushing Lily slightly above the waterline. Her hands found his back instinctively, clutching for something, anything solid. But the river wasn't done testing them. Twigs and branches threatened to catch her jacket, and the current twisted, pulling her sideways, threatening to rip her from Rex's grasp. No one moved. No one could. The river was merciless, the current unstoppable, and for the first time everyone realized that this was no ordinary rescue. If Lily survived, it would be because of the dog, not humans, not ropes, not chance, but because of something older, deeper, an instinct they didn't understand. And as the river swallowed them again, spinning them toward unknown hazards, the crowd could only watch in frozen terror, hearts pounding, as one small, black Labrador and one terrified little girl battled against the relentless force of nature. For a second the river was silence. Then a wave crashed over both of them, and the question burned in everyone's mind. Would Rex make it in time? Would Lily survive the river's pull? Or was this terrifying autumn afternoon about to end in tragedy? Rex surged through the river, his paws cutting furiously against the icy current, every movement powered by sheer determination. Water churned around him like molten metal, thrashing and splashing over Lily, pulling at her jacket as though the river itself were trying to claim her. Her tiny hands clutched desperately at his slick, wet fur, teeth gritted as she fought panic, cold, and exhaustion. She could barely lift her head, but she could see him. The dog she hadn't known she'd depend on, charging through death, waiting arms with nothing but instinct, loyalty, and courage fueling him. The crowd along the riverbank shouted incoherently, their voices rising and falling with the tumult of the water. Some begged for someone to throw a rope, some sobbed, some froze in place. No one dared approach the river's edge. Muddy banks gave way easily, stones were slippery, and the current had already proven itself merciless. But all eyes were glued to the black shape that refused to surrender, a blur of fur cutting through the chaos. "Keep her close, Rex," James shouted, his voice cracking, teeth clenched against fear. His hands were trembling, gripping the edge of the river like a lifeline to hope. Years of walking rivers, of fishing in these same waters, taught him how quickly the current could turn from nuisance to predator. And yet he had never, not in his life, seen anything like this. His old Labrador, paddling tirelessly, moving with precision and purpose that no human could match, dragging a child as if she were the most precious thing on earth. The river spun them sideways, its power relentless. Lily's arms were numb, her legs aching, but she refused to let go. Her eyes locked on Rex, the only constant in a world turned upside down. She felt something shift in her chest, a spark of trust, almost like instinct itself was telling her that he would not let her die. And perhaps in some way she knew he wouldn't. Branches and debris slammed into them, knocking the girl under for a terrifying second. Her lungs burned as she gasped, her hair plastered to her face, eyes stinging with water and tears. Yet Rex didn't falter. He adjusted his body, twisting slightly to shield her from the next wave, paddling with a speed and accuracy that defied his age. Gray flecks dotted his black coat, his muscles straining against exhaustion, yet he did not slow. He could not. People on the shore began to move instinctively, shouting directions to one another. "Grab a rope," one yelled, but everyone froze as they realized the rope was too short, tangled in branches, and would not reach. Another person ran to a bridge nearby, hopping to throw a line from above, but by the time they returned with it, the current had carried Lily and Rex farther downstream. For the first time, the crowd understood. This was no ordinary rescue. It was a miracle in motion, and the miracle was a dog. Lily clung with every ounce of strength she had, her fingers slipping, teeth chattering, arms trembling from cold. Yet she sensed the dog's determination, a presence so powerful it overshadowed fear itself. He wasn't fighting the river. He was riding it, letting the current push him towards safety while protecting her from its worst edges. Each time a wave slammed into them, she clung tighter, convinced she would lose him, and that fear only made her hold on stronger. Rex's body burned with effort. Every paw stroke demanded precision. The river's hidden rocks threatened to tear him from Lily's side. His jaws held tight to the pink jacket, teeth gentle yet unyielding. He twisted to avoid a submerged branch, his instincts anticipating danger faster than anyone on the riverbank could even react. He knew no strategy but love and instinct, and it was enough. The elderly man on the shore, James, shouted again, directing Rex with commands only he could understand. "Left, keep the current at your side, don't fight it." The words were sharp, urgent, born from decades of walking rivers and understanding their moods. Rex responded instantly, adjusting his angle, letting the water do part of the work while he steered Lily toward a bend where the river slowed. But the river had one final, cruel twist in store. Ahead, a cluster of jagged branches and submerged rocks waited like sentinels, hidden just beneath the surface. A slip here would tear the jacket, injure the child, or end both lives. The crowd gasped as Lily collided briefly with the first obstacle, the impact knocking her under again. The shock of the cold water hit her lungs, and she inhaled too quickly, choking, panicking. Her body began to go limp, her grip loosening. Then Rex lunged. He twisted his body at the last second, using his strength to pivot both himself and Lily away from the worst of the branches. His paws struck with incredible force, propelling them both forward. Lily resurfaced, coughing violently, gasping and hanging on by a thread. The crowd on the bank erupted with shouts of encouragement, but fear still gripped them. They had no idea if this was enough. Rex paddled harder than ever. His old body ached, lungs burned, but he kept moving, relentless. He wasn't thinking about danger. He wasn't thinking about exhaustion. He was thinking about one thing, Lily. His eyes locked on her face, his entire being focused on keeping her alive. The bond between dog and child was almost tangible now, a magnetic force that defied logic. The crowd could see it, even if they couldn't understand it. This was no ordinary animal. This was a hero in fur, beating the river with nothing but courage. And then, just as hope seemed like it might prevail, a massive wave struck. Lily's head slipped beneath the surface again, hair plastered over her face, eyes wide in terror. The crowd gasped, a collective scream rising into the cold sky. No one dared move closer. The river's wrath was undeniable. For a heartbeat, it felt as if everything had been for nothing. And yet Rex refused to falter. His jaws tightened on the jacket. He twisted, paddled, kicked, and surged forward, defying exhaustion and nature itself. The dog and the girl disappeared once more beneath the churning water, swallowed by the river, but not for long. Somewhere downstream, a bend awaited, a shallow curve where hope could take root, and Rex paddled toward it with every ounce of his being. The crowd held its breath. Mothers pressed children to their chests. Fathers leaned forward, frozen in disbelief. Everyone understood one terrifying, exhilarating truth. This dog, this simple old Labrador, was the only thing standing between life and death. And just when it seemed the river might claim them both, Rex's head broke the surface again. Eyes sharp, jaws still holding Lily's jacket, muscles straining, and the river, for the first time, seemed to pause in recognition of the impossible courage flowing through that black, wet body. The crowd waited, heartbeats synced to the waves, as one simple question burned in the autumn air. Would Rex actually bring her out alive? Or was the river about to have the final, cruel word? The river's roar was deafening now, a wall of sound that swallowed every other noise. The frantic shouts from the riverbank, the sobs of parents, the pounding of hearts, even Lily's own terrified screams. The water churned violently around her, dragging her sideways as her small body thrashed, trying to stay afloat. Each gasp brought burning water into her lungs. Each kick felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the sodden pink jacket that had once been cheerful and bright. She clung desperately to the dog's slick fur, her tiny fingers trembling as she tried to keep hold of her lifeline. Rex paddled relentlessly, his old black coat glistening under the gray autumn sky, muscles straining beyond exhaustion. Each stroke pushed against a river that seemed determined to rip them apart, yet he adjusted instinctively, letting the current do part of the work while keeping Lily above the water. The dog's eyes never left her face, and Lily felt a flicker of trust amidst the terror. Somehow, despite the icy water and the raging current, she felt that he would not fail her. The crowd on the riverbank had grown silent. Phones recording the scene had lowered, forgotten in the shock. People were frozen, their hearts lodged in their throats as they watched the struggle unfold. Mothers clutched children tightly, unable to tear their eyes away. Fathers leaned on each other, white-knuckled, muttering prayers to whatever deity might listen. For everyone present, it was no longer a spectacle. It was a test of instinct, courage, and the sheer force of will. A wave slammed into them from the left, nearly flipping both Lily and Rex over. Lily's head dipped under the water and panic surged like wildfire in her chest. Her arms flailed, nails scraping Rex's fur, teeth clenched against the shock of the cold. For a second she was underwater, the world reduced to murky darkness and the violent tug of the river. She felt herself being pulled downstream, away from the bank, away from hope. And then Rex reappeared. With a single, violent surge of strength, he twisted his body beneath her, pushing her back above the waterline. His paws cut through the current like oars, precise and relentless. Lily clung to him, coughing, shivering, unable to speak, but somehow feeling a pulse of hope that she had thought impossible. Every kick of his back legs, every paddle of his strong paws was a statement. I will not let you go. I will not let you drown. James on the riverbank barked instructions, voice trembling with desperation and urgency. Straight, keep her head above water, use the current. Rex responded, paddling at a perfect angle, using the river's force to steer them toward a small bend where the water slowed just enough to offer a chance at survival. The bend approached, but danger still waited. Jagged rocks and submerged branches jutted out like teeth, hidden beneath the murky water. The river slammed Lily into one of them, knocking the wind out of her entirely. For a terrifying moment, her grip on Rex faltered. The dog's jaws snapped gently over the jacket again, pulling her back into the fight for life. Water splashed over them in relentless waves, and the crowd gasped, some covering their mouths in horror. It was a fight of wills, child against river, dog against nature, instinct against chaos. Time stretched, elongated by fear and adrenaline. Lily's lungs burned, her arms ached, and yet she refused to let go. She clutched Rex with all her remaining strength, teeth gritted, eyes wide, heart pounding. The current seemed to mock them, spinning them sideways again, but Rex twisted with calculated precision, angling his body, pushing them toward the only hope. A shallow bend where the water slowed, where they might be pulled to safety. And then a new threat emerged. Submerged debris, hidden just beneath the surface, loomed like a wall. Branches scraped against Rex's sides, jolting him with painful shocks. Lily's body scraped against jagged wood, and for a terrifying moment it seemed the river would win. The crowd's collective fear surged, a tangible wave that rolled along the bank, carried in gasps and whispered prayers. But Rex refused to surrender. Every muscle in his old body burned, lungs straining, teeth clamped gently yet firmly on Lily's jacket. He twisted, ducked, paddled, and surged forward, keeping Lily above the water, keeping her safe. The dog's actions were precise, instinctual, heroic in a way that no human could emulate. His body moved in perfect synchronization with the river's currents, turning potential disaster into a narrow chance at survival. Lily felt herself lifted slightly, almost imperceptibly above the worst of the debris. She gasped for air, coughing violently, but clung to Rex without hesitation. Her terror was still intense, but now mixed with awe. Somehow, in the chaos, she understood that this dog had become more than an animal. He had become her protector, her guardian, her unlikely hero. James on the shore shouted again, voice hoarse from fear and effort. "To the left, Rex. You can do it," the dog responded, paddling with renewed vigor, riding the current, nudging Lily toward the shallow bend where the water's fury lessened just enough to offer hope. The crowd leaned forward, eyes wide, breaths held. Every second stretched, every splash of water a potential tragedy. Then, just as it seemed they might make it, a massive wave slammed into them. Lily went under again, panic clawing at her chest. For a horrifying instant she felt herself slipping, losing grip, losing hope. But Rex, with a surge of energy that defied his aging body, twisted beneath her, his jaws gripping the jacket, his paws cutting through the water. He pushed, propelled, fought, and surged forward with a determination that was almost supernatural. The crowd gasped, collectively holding its breath, as Rex and Lily emerged once more, inching closer to the bend. Water still surged around them, but the current softened slightly. For the first time there was a glimmer of hope. The river had not yet claimed them. And just as the bend came into view, a sharp cry went up from James. "Watch out! Rocks ahead!" The dog and girl surged forward, hearts racing, muscles screaming, bodies battered, but the bend offered the first real chance at salvation. The crowd's collective gasp echoed across the riverbank, a mixture of relief and terror. It was a breath away, the edge of hope, the edge of safety, the edge of disaster. The river was still unforgiving, but for a fleeting moment, everyone understood that survival was possible. And then, just as the shallow water approached, the river revealed its final hidden test. A submerged tree trunk, jagged and unseen, loomed directly in their path. Lily's jacket snagged. Rex's body slammed against it. Water slammed over them. The crowd screamed. Would this be the end? The submerged tree trunk jutted out of the river like a jagged sentinel, hidden just beneath the murky, churning water. Lily's jacket snagged for the first time, pulling her sideways, jerking her small body against the current. Her breath hitched in terror, water slapping her face as panic threatened to take over. She clawed at Rex, clinging desperately to the one constant she could trust. Rex slammed into the trunk, yelping in pain, his paws scraping against submerged roots. The crowd on the riverbank gasped, many pressing their hands to their mouths. "Oh God, no!" someone shouted, the horror of the moment crashing over them like a tidal wave. The river's roar seemed to grow louder, more ferocious, as if it sensed the final showdown between life and death. James's face went pale. He had walked these riverbanks for decades, read its moods, understood its hidden dangers, and yet even he felt a surge of terror. He could see it all unfolding, the river's currents, the hidden obstacles, and the girl's struggle for survival. But he also saw something else, a chance, however slim, for rescue. He shouted commands, his voice cutting sharply over the roar of the water. "Rex, angle left, push her forward. Don't fight it, use the bend." The old dog responded immediately, muscles coiling and uncoiling with precision, every stroke calculated. Years of instinct, years of training that had long lain dormant came alive in this single moment. He twisted his body, paddled with incredible force, and lifted Lily's body slightly above the snag, reducing the pull on her jacket. For a heartbeat, it seemed impossible. They were still in the river's grip, the tree trunk looming, the current relentless. The crowd held their collective breath. Mothers clutched children to their chests, some kneeling on the muddy bank, eyes wide with fear. Fathers leaned forward, white-knuckled, straining to see every movement, praying silently, shouting sporadically, but powerless to intervene. Every second was agony. Every splash of water a reminder of how quickly things could go wrong. Lily coughed violently, swallowing water, her lungs burning, her arms trembling with exhaustion. But she clung to Rex, teeth gritted, eyes wide in terror and awe. Somehow in the chaos, she felt the dog's determination radiating through his every muscle. He was not just swimming. He was calculating, protecting, guiding, fighting for her life in a way that defied human understanding. Rex twisted again, angling his body just right. His paws struck against the current, pushing them forward, lifting Lily slightly as he avoided the worst of the submerged debris. The river roared, but the bend was closer now. The shallow water could be seen glimmering faintly, a subtle promise of salvation. Yet one last hazard remained, a cluster of hidden rocks, sharp and jagged, barely visible beneath the surface, threatening to crush them both. James's voice rose again, urgent and precise. "To the right, keep your paws together. Use the flow, not against it." His words, trembling yet clear, seemed to reach through the chaos, guiding Rex in a way no human could. Every paddle, every stroke, every breath of the dog's body became a perfect response to his commands. This was not mere instinct. It was an unspoken partnership, decades of understanding flowing through one critical, desperate moment. Rex surged forward with a last burst of strength. He struck the current perfectly, gliding just above the submerged rocks. Lily's tiny arms wrapped tighter around his neck, clinging for dear life. The crowd on the shore gasped, some kneeling, some shaking, some frozen in disbelief. Every eye was locked on them, everyone's breath held as if the world itself had paused. The dog's body burned with exertion. His limbs ached, his lungs screamed, and yet he did not slow. He had only one focus, moving Lily to the safety that shimmered just ahead. Every wave threatened to undo them, every hidden branch a potential catastrophe. Yet he pushed forward, paddling with a precision that seemed almost impossible for his age. A sudden wave slammed into them from the side, spinning Lily partially underwater. Fear clawed at her chest, panic threatening to overtake her. Her hands slipped momentarily from Rex's fur. For a horrifying second, it seemed she would be lost to the river's fury. But Rex reacted instantly. He twisted, shifted his weight, and snapped his jaws gently over the pink jacket again, tugging her back into alignment with his body. The crowd gasped, some sobbing, some cheering, some simply frozen. No one had ever seen anything like this, a dog battling nature itself, saving a child with nothing but courage and instinct. The bend in the river was just ahead now, and with it, the first real hope. The water slowed, rocks became less frequent, and the pull of the current lessened just enough for salvation to be within reach. Lily, exhausted, shivering, coughing violently, clung to Rex with every ounce of strength she had left. The dog paddled with precision, lifting her above the last obstacles, guiding her toward the shallow bend where hands could finally reach them. Rex's muscles burned, his chest heaving, his paws slick with river water, but he did not falter. He angled perfectly, responding to James's commands, weaving through debris and keeping Lily alive. The crowd's collective heartbeat seemed to sync with his paddling. Mothers whispered prayers, fathers held their breath, children clutched at one another, and somewhere along the riverbank someone muttered, He's going to do it, he has to. For Lily, every second was agony and relief at once. The cold had stolen her strength, the water had pulled her to the edge of despair, but now she felt a spark of hope. The bend was near, and with it, the chance of survival. She coughed violently again, but this time the cough carried relief. She could see the bank approaching, the muddy edge where hands would reach for her, where safety waited. And yet the river had one final test. A hidden branch, thin and jagged, jutted just above the surface, aimed directly at them. Rex collided with it briefly, yelping, his fur snagged, paws slipping. Lily's grip faltered for a heartbeat, heart stopping, eyes wide in terror. The crowd screamed, some in panic, some in awe, as the moment stretched infinitely. Then Rex responded. With a surge of energy that seemed impossible, he twisted his body, lifted Lily slightly, and paddled with all the strength left in his aging frame. The branch scraped past, missing them by inches. Lily emerged above the water, clinging desperately, eyes wide with shock and awe. The bend was close now. Shallow water shimmered faintly in front of them, promising rescue. The current slowed just enough for hands to reach, just enough for life to be claimed from the jaws of death. James's voice rang out one final time, hoarse and trembling but filled with hope. "Almost there, Rex, almost there." The dog paddled, muscles screaming, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the bank. Every stroke was perfect, every movement instinctive yet guided by decades of understanding between man and dog. They were almost there, on the brink of safety. And just as the shallow bend seemed within reach, a new wave surged from upstream, threatening to roll them back into the river's heart. Lily's tiny arms tightened around Rex, her heart leaping in terror. The crowd on the shore gasped as one, collectively frozen in anticipation, watching the impossible struggle unfold. Would Rex be able to fight this final wave? Would they make it to safety, or would the river claim them both in the last, cruel moment? The river surged violently, as though it had saved its final fury for this moment. Waves slapped against Lily, icy and unrelenting, dragging her down into the watery chaos. Her arms trembled, small fingers clutching Rex's fur as she gasped for breath, coughs ripping through her chest. Her shivering body weighed heavily against the dog's broad shoulders, her pink jacket now soaked, torn at the edges, but still the lifeline holding her above the current. Every second felt like an eternity, every heartbeat a drum of terror and hope intertwined. Rex's old body strained under the weight of exhaustion and waterlogged fur, every muscle burned. His lungs screamed for air, yet he didn't falter. He twisted, paddled, and surged forward with a precision born of instinct, courage, and the trust between him and Lily. One paw, then the next, cut through the waves, each stroke inching them closer to the shallow bend where salvation waited. The crowd along the riverbank held its collective breath, some kneeling, some frozen, some pressing hands to faces in disbelief. Mothers whispered prayers, some silent, some tearful, while fathers muttered under their breath, eyes locked on the frantic scene. Every person knew in the depths of their fear that one misstep could end everything. James, still standing at the edge, shouted with hoarse urgency, voice cracking from adrenaline and hope. "Use the current, Rex. Angle left, almost there." His instructions cut through the roar of the river, precise and sharp, guiding the dog in ways that no one else could comprehend. Every flick of Rex's paw, every twist of his body, responded to these commands instinctively, almost as if decades of experience and connection flowed through a single, unbroken line from man to dog. The submerged rocks and hidden branches loomed like jagged teeth, waiting to snag them, to drag them under. Lily's small body flailed as another wave slammed into them. Her tiny head went underwater for a terrifying second. Panic clawed at her chest. The crowd gasped in unison. Somewhere someone whispered, "Please, please let them make it." Rex responded immediately, twisting, adjusting, paddling with furious precision. His teeth held gently but firmly on the torn jacket, keeping Lily tethered to life. He twisted around a submerged branch, just barely avoiding injury. His paws found footing against hidden debris, pushing them forward. The bend in the river was closer now, a shallow curve where the water's current slowed, where hands could finally reach them. Lily coughed violently, water pouring from her mouth, lungs aching. She was near the edge of unconsciousness, shivering violently, body shaking from cold and exhaustion. Yet she held on to Rex with everything she had left. Her terror was nearly overwhelming, but hope flared within her chest. Somehow, someway, the dog would get her through this. Somehow, she would survive. The crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and terrified gasps as the bend drew near. Fingers reached out instinctively, ready to grab both dog and child. Mothers covered mouths, tears streaming down cheeks. Fathers leaned forward, trembling. Some children pressed faces against parents, eyes wide, too young to fully understand the miracle unfolding. Phones were lowered, forgotten. No one dared look away. Rex twisted one final time, paddling with a surge of strength that defied his age. The river fought back, a massive wave striking from upstream, threatening to roll them back into the current's heart. Lily screamed as the water slammed her sideways. Her grip on Rex faltered for an instant. The crowd gasped in horror. For a heartbeat, it seemed the river might win, as if mocking the bravery of one old dog and one tiny child. Then something extraordinary happened. Rex's instincts, honed over years of trust and survival, kicked in. He lunged forward, paddling with desperate precision, twisting his body to use the wave's energy instead of fighting it. His paws struck the water in perfect rhythm. Every stroke moved them closer. Every breath lifted Lily's head just enough above the churning chaos. The dog became a machine of determination, a force of nature itself, a guardian of life that refused to fail. Hands from the shore reached forward, fingertips brushing the edges of the dog's fur and Lily's arms. James's voice rang out, guiding, shouting, trembling. Almost there. One more push. The river surged one last time. Lily felt herself pulled downward, the current trying to steal her from Rex's jaws. Panic gripped her, teeth clenched, eyes wide. She inhaled sharply, coughing, trying to stay with the dog. And then Rex pushed with everything left in his body. Every muscle screamed, every paw struck the water, every twist of his neck and shoulders calculated to perfection. In a moment that felt suspended outside time, they surged forward, sliding over the last jagged rocks, the last debris, toward the shallow bend. Hands grabbed them simultaneously, adults, fingers pressing against fur and fabric, lifting Lily and Rex from the river's grip. The crowd erupted, some screaming in relief, some crying openly, some simply frozen, overwhelmed by what they had just witnessed. Lily was coughing violently, water dripping from her hair, eyes wide but alive. She collapsed into the arms of rescuers, shaking from cold and fear, but she was safe. Rex lay next to her, chest heaving, legs trembling, wet fur plastered to his body. He had given everything he had, and yet he had not let go. The old dog blinked slowly, exhausted but unbroken, eyes still fixed on Lily. James knelt beside him, hands trembling, whispering his name over and over. Good boy, you did it, you saved her." Tears streamed down the elderly man's face as he stroked Rex's wet, trembling fur. The crowd was silent now, too overwhelmed for words, hearts still racing, minds unable to fully process the miracle they had just witnessed. Medics checked Lily quickly, making sure she was breathing normally. She coughed, shivered violently, but she was alive. Relief washed over the crowd, but the river, indifferent and unrelenting, continued its roar. It had been beaten this time, but barely. The bond between dog and child was palpable, unspoken, and undeniable. Lily looked into Rex's exhausted eyes, whispering through chattering teeth, "Thank you, thank you." Her tiny hand stroked his wet fur, and for the first time the dog's tail thumped weakly in response. The crowd began to cheer, slowly at first, then louder, more jubilantly. People clapped, some wept, some cheered, but the riverbank remained a place of awestruck silence as everyone realized what had just happened. This was more than a rescue. It was courage, instinct, and love made manifest in a single old dog who refused to let a child die. And in that moment, no one moved. All eyes were on Rex, who lay panting on the muddy bank, wet fur glistening, body trembling from exertion but alive. Lily clutched him to her chest, whispering her thanks again and again. For the first time it felt real. The nightmare had ended and life had been saved. But even in the relief, the crowd held its breath, because everyone knew the river had come dangerously close to claiming both lives, and the memory of what had almost happened would linger forever. And one question remained, unspoken but felt by all. How could a single dog, an aging Labrador, have faced the river and triumphed when every human instinct failed? The chaos of the riverbank faded into an almost eerie stillness. For minutes, no one moved. The crowd stood frozen, mud-soaked shoes planted in place, eyes locked on the small, miraculous scene before them. Lily, dripping wet and shivering, clung to Rex as though he were the only thing in the world keeping her alive. Her tears mixed with river water on her face, cheeks streaked pink and pale with cold. Each breath she took was shaky, every shiver an echo of the ordeal she had survived. Rex lay on the muddy bank, chest heaving, paws trembling. His fur, once glossy black, was now soaked and matted with mud and river debris. He blinked slowly, exhausted to the point of collapse, yet his eyes never left Lily. Even in his weakened state, the bond between dog and child radiated a quiet intensity. To the crowd, it was as if the river had carved a sacred pause in time, honoring the courage and loyalty of this remarkable animal. James, the elderly man who had raised and walked Rex for nearly a decade, knelt beside him, hands shaking, tears streaming down his face. He pressed his forehead to Rex's wet fur, whispering, "You did it. You saved her, my boy, my brave boy." His voice cracked, breaking into sobs as he stroked every inch of Rex's exhausted body. For him, there were no words to match the miracle that had just occurred, no way to articulate the fear, the hope, and the pride that mingled in one overwhelming flood of emotion. The crowd began to move slightly, almost reluctantly, as if waking from a shared trance. Mothers clutched their children closer, some covering their mouths to stifle sobs. Fathers exhaled shakily, some leaning on each other, overwhelmed by the spectacle of survival. People began to whisper, and the whispers turned into quiet applause. Phones were still recording, but no one seemed to care anymore. The moment was too raw, too real to be captured on a screen. This was life, terrifying and miraculous, unfolding before them without filters or edits. Lily's parents rushed forward, faces pale, eyes wide with a mixture of relief and lingering terror. Her mother dropped to her knees, hugging her daughter as though trying to merge into one being to protect her. Tears streamed freely down her face. "Oh, Lily, my baby, my sweet baby," she whispered repeatedly. Her father held her shoulders, eyes glistening, voice trembling. "You're okay, you're okay." His words were simple but carried the weight of every fear he had held in those terrifying minutes. Through the fog of adrenaline, Lily looked down at Rex. Her small hand stroked his fur gently, marveling at the courage she couldn't fully comprehend. You saved me," she whispered, voice barely audible over the receding roar of the river. Rex wagged his tail weakly, panting, a low, soft bark escaping his throat. It was not the triumphant bark of victory, it was the quiet acknowledgement of a duty fulfilled, a promise kept. James stood slowly, still trembling, and addressed the crowd, his voice hoarse but steady. "He didn't think about himself," he said, gesturing toward Rex. "He didn't hesitate, he didn't consider the danger. He just knew she needed him, that's all that mattered." A hush fell over the crowd. Everyone seemed to understand in that moment that this was no ordinary dog. This was a guardian, a hero, a creature who had placed love above instinct, devotion above survival. The medics finally moved in, checking Lily over carefully. She coughed, shivered, and her lips were still tinged blue from the cold, but she was alive. Her pulse was strong, and her terror, though lingering, was beginning to fade under the warmth and reassurance of her parents' arms. The paramedics nodded to James and the crowd, giving silent approval that she would be okay. Yet the focus remained on Rex, lying on the muddy bank, still breathing heavily, still clinging to life after giving everything he had. People began approaching cautiously, offering water and soft pats, but James waved them off gently. "Let him rest," he said firmly. He's done more than anyone could ever ask. He saved her, that's enough for now. His eyes never left the dog's face. He understood something deep and ineffable. This was a sacred bond, one that had been forged in the heart of chaos and fear. No outsider could interrupt it. As the adrenaline began to fade, silence settled over the riverbank. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water against the shallow edge, Lily's quiet breaths and Rex's slow, exhausted panting. People whispered to each other, still in awe, some shaking their heads. "I can't believe it," one mother said softly. I've never seen anything like that in my life." Another parent nodded. "He saved her. He really saved her." For Lily, the terror of the river was beginning to ebb, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude she could barely articulate. She leaned into Rex, wrapping her arms around his trembling body. "Thank you," she whispered again. I don't know what I'd do without you." Rex rested his head gently against her shoulder, his eyes half closed, a low rumble of acknowledgement escaping his throat. James finally spoke again, addressing the gathered crowd. "I've walked this river 1,000 times," he said, voice steady now. "I've seen kids fall, I've seen accidents, and I've never seen anything like this. That dog, he didn't hesitate. He saved a life, and for that we owe him everything." The crowd nodded, some wiping tears from their eyes, some simply standing in stunned silence. The local sheriff arrived on the scene, nodding at James and kneeling beside Rex. "We'll make sure he gets care," he said, scanning the riverbank. "But you've got a hero here." His words hung in the air, more than just a statement. They were a recognition of the extraordinary courage, a human acknowledgement of something almost divine in the instinct of a dog who refused to let a child die. As Lily's parents hugged her tightly, she looked back at the river, its dark waters now calm, deceptively peaceful. The memory of the roar, the waves, the icy pull of the current, and the terror of nearly drowning would stay with her forever. But she also remembered Rex, his courage, his devotion, the way he had fought through exhaustion and fear to save her life. The river had been cruel, but love, loyalty, and instinct had been stronger. The crowd began to disperse slowly, parents clutching their children, whispers of awe spreading like wildfire. Yet even as the riverbank emptied, a silence lingered, heavy and reverent. It was the silence of people who had witnessed something extraordinary, something that defied explanation. Everyone present knew they had been part of a story that would be told for years, a story of a child saved, a dog's heroism, and the fragile thread between life and death. James finally stood fully, brushing mud from his clothes, hands still shaking. He looked down at Rex, still panting, still exhausted. "You're the bravest dog I've ever known," he whispered, kneeling to stroke his fur. "You saved her life. You're more than a dog, you're a miracle." Rex's eyes, heavy with fatigue, blinked slowly, acknowledging the words without the need for understanding. The bond between them was unspoken, unbreakable, and complete. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden reflections across the river's surface, the town of Willow Creek would remember the day a dog became more than a pet. He became a hero, a guardian, a creature who reminded everyone present that courage and love could transcend fear, exhaustion, and even the merciless force of nature itself. The crowd eventually left, but the silence lingered, like a sacred pause in the world. People would tell stories of what they had seen, but none would fully capture the fear, the courage, and the quiet heroism of a black Labrador who had refused to let a child die. And even as the night settled in, with shadows stretching across the river and the chill of autumn air settling over the town, Lily and Rex remained together on the bank. She clutched him, shivering but safe. He lay at her side, exhausted but alive. No one spoke. No one moved. Everyone who had witnessed the miracle understood. Some acts of heroism leave words behind. Others leave silence. And in that silence, everyone knew the truth. Rex had changed everything. By the next morning, Willow Creek was alive with whispers of the previous day's miracle. News traveled faster than the morning breeze, carrying tales of terror, courage, and awe. Every adult recounted the same story with slight variations: how the river had roared, how Lily had struggled, how every heart along the bank had stopped when the icy current threatened to claim her. but all accounts returned to the same truth. Rex, the old black Labrador, had defied the river itself and saved her life. The townspeople arrived at the riverbank in quiet awe. Some came to see where it had happened, mud still clinging to rocks and tree roots, water lapping gently at the shallow bend. Children peered curiously, eyes wide, whispering about the dog hero, while adults nodded gravely, still processing the terror they had witnessed. The river, now deceptively calm, seemed to carry a new respect in its currents, as though it, too, remembered the courage it had failed to crush. Lily sat with her parents near the riverbank, wrapped in a warm blanket. Her face, though pale, was lit with a mix of relief and wonder. She kept glancing at Rex, lying nearby with James at his side. The dog's fur was still damp, his body exhausted, but his eyes glimmered with a quiet pride. Lily reached out, stroking his head gently, whispering, "You're amazing, you saved me." James smiled softly, his voice thick with emotion. "He didn't think about saving himself," he said. "All that mattered was you. That's who he is, that's what he does." His gaze shifted to the river, then back to Rex, a mixture of pride, love, and awe shining in his eyes. "I've walked this river 1,000 times. I've never seen courage like this before. Not in a man, not in a machine, not in anything except him." Word of the rescue spread quickly, and soon neighbors began to arrive. Some carried coffee, some blankets, others cameras or notebooks. Everyone wanted to witness the hero, the living proof that courage and loyalty could transcend fear, danger, and the impossible. Rex became the center of attention, yet he remained calm, lying on the muddy grass, tongue lolling, eyes half closed, accepting pats and gentle scratches but not performing for anyone. Heroism, he seemed to say, needed no applause. Lily's parents were overwhelmed with gratitude. Her mother hugged Rex tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. I thought I'd lost her." Her father placed a hand on Rex's broad back, voice husky. "You saved her life. You gave her a future. We will never forget this." The dog wagged his tail weakly, resting his head on Lily's lap as if to acknowledge their words without understanding them fully. School children, arriving later, stared at Rex with wide eyes. "He's a hero," one whispered. Another nodded. "A real-life hero." Teachers quietly explained to the children the danger of rivers, but also the incredible loyalty and bravery of animals, pointing to Rex as a living example. Whispers of admiration and wonder spread through the small town, cementing the legend of the day a dog challenged nature and won. Even the local sheriff stopped by, nodding to James and Rex. "We'll make sure he gets recognized," he said. "Animals like him, they're rare. This town owes him a debt we can never repay." James smiled, grateful but quiet. "Recognition isn't necessary," he said. "He didn't do this for fame, he did it because it was right. That's enough." As the day progressed, Lily returned to the riverbank repeatedly, fascinated by the place where fear had nearly claimed her and courage had saved her. She touched the water lightly with trembling fingers, thinking of how cold it had been, how violent, how merciless. And she thought of Rex, paddling tirelessly, twisting against the current, lifting her above the waves, never faltering. The memory filled her chest with awe and gratitude. "I'll never forget," she whispered, voice soft but firm. "I'll never forget what you did." Rex, lying beside her on the muddy grass, nudged her gently with his nose. The old dog, who had given everything in those desperate moments, had returned to the calm after the storm. He did not boast. He did not demand attention. He simply existed, loyal and patient, as if aware that the story of his courage would carry itself through the hearts of everyone present. In the coming weeks, the story spread beyond Willow Creek. Local news outlets covered it, calling Rex a hero, a miracle, a guardian angel in the form of a dog. Social media shared images of Lily wrapped in a blanket beside her black Labrador, and the videos recorded by bystanders went viral. Millions of people saw the courage of one animal against the unrelenting power of nature, and hearts everywhere swelled with awe. Comments poured in, stories of gratitude, disbelief, and admiration. Some called Rex a hero, some called him a miracle, and many simply called him extraordinary. But in Willow Creek, the story was more intimate. It wasn't just about the video clips or news stories. It was about the people who had witnessed it firsthand. Parents whispered to their children about bravery, loyalty, and courage. Friends shared hushed awe, replaying the moments when Rex had twisted, paddled, and protected. And Lily, every time she looked at Rex, remembered not just the fear, but the love, trust, and miracle that had saved her life. For James, the memory of that day remained forever etched. He walked the river every morning, but now with a new sense of reverence. Each ripple reminded him of the courage he had seen. Each bend of the river spoke of the bond between dog and child that had defied impossible odds. He often paused, looking at Rex resting quietly by the riverbank, and whispered, "You're more than a dog, you're a hero." Years later, Willow Creek would remember the story, not just as a tale of near tragedy, but as a testament to the extraordinary courage of one creature who refused to give up. Children would grow up hearing of the dog who faced a raging river to save a little girl. Parents would tell it to their children with tears in their eyes. And Lily, now older, would never forget the day her life was saved by a black Labrador who defied death, exhaustion, and fear for her. Even the river seemed different after that day. It flowed with the same force, the same unpredictability, yet somehow in the hearts of those who had witnessed it, it carried a memory of hope and heroism. A reminder that courage could come from the most unexpected places, that love and instinct, even in the form of an old dog, could challenge fate itself. And on quiet evenings, Lily would sit by the river, resting her hand on Rex's head, feeling the steady warmth of life beside her. She would tell him stories of school, of friends, of the world beyond the riverbank, and he would listen quietly, tail thumping softly in response. She would never forget the fear, the struggle, the icy water, but she would also never forget the bravery, the devotion, and the miracle of the dog who had refused to let her go. In the hearts of everyone who had watched, and in the memories of those who heard the story, one truth endured. Courage does not always come in uniforms or swords. Sometimes it comes in fur, in pause, in the quiet, unyielding determination of a loyal companion who will fight against impossible odds to protect the life of someone they love. And in Willow Creek, the story of the black Labrador named Rex became legend, a story of fear, courage, survival, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog. It was a story that left people speechless, hearts full, and eyes wet with awe. Some would call it luck, some would call it instinct, some would call it a miracle, but for Lily, for James, and for everyone who had witnessed it, it was simply the undeniable truth. Rex had saved a life, and everyone who remembered that day would never, ever forget it.